What a counterattack! NATO fiasco revealed Germany has neither tanks nor weapons to send to Ukraine. Despite its warmongering and anti-Russian rhetoric, the German government cannot contribute to NATO's war plans. It seems that the much legendary spring counteroffensive will remain on the cards, as the Western camp, for one reason or another, cannot and does not intend to send the required equipment to Ukraine for such a gigantic military undertaking. Despite its warmongering and anti-Russian rhetoric, German government cannot contribute to NATO's war plans. The funding provided to the German armed forces is insufficient to meet the West's current defense needs, raising a number of criticisms and questions about Berlin's role in the U.S. proxy war against Russia. The newspaper Bild on April 11 cited sources within the German armed forces, claims that Germany is facing difficulties in complying with the obligations imposed by NATO. This data was analyzed in March 2023 by two Bundeswehr officials. Germany's military capability is limited. According to the officials, German combat readiness currently required by NATO is limited, they said. As proof of this fact, it's also reported that one of the tank divisions that Berlin had promised to put into NATO service is facing a 21% shortage of its units. Previously, the German government's expectation was to place the entire division in NATO service by 2025, but it's already considered almost impossible to achieve this goal within that time period. According to newspaper Bild sources, even if units from other branches of the German armed forces began to be made available, it will be difficult to overcome the current problem. Similar problems are observed in other areas of the army, confirming a real situation of military weakness in the country, the geopolitical and military analysis points out in an article in South Front. More than the simple problem of fulfilling NATO's plans, there is also the question of the consequences of those goals. Structural problems. As Berlin faces structural and historic problems with its armed forces, fulfilling NATO obligations becomes a major challenge as the country is forced to stop investing in other areas of strategic interest in its defense sector, obeying the begging of the United States. The result is a disastrous situation where the country becomes ineffective both for NATO and for its own military. The publication points to two central reasons why Germany is facing such problems: the absence of an adequate defense budget and continued military assistance to Ukraine in the conflict with Russia. In fact, although it has a strong industrial sector, including military industry, Berlin maintains an extremely low-quality defense apparatus with limited troops and equipment and obsolete weapons of little strategic importance. The situation is further aggravated by Germany's adherence to the anti-Russian war policy of the Western Alliance. According to Leyerots, Berlin has simply pledged to give Ukraine more than its defense capabilities allow, so that the country is no longer able to maintain support for Zelensky's regime in Ukraine and its own security and NATO's combat readiness required at the same time. Country colony. Indeed, the Bild reports confirm some early observations made by German officials. For example, in February, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius stated that Berlin does not have armed forces that are capable of defending Ukraine, that is, to face an ongoing war of aggression. At the same time, the head of Germany's Armed Forces Association, Colonel Andrei Wistner, warned of the absence of key equipment as a result of the shipments to Ukraine front line, saying, "To date, we have not replaced the self-propelled howitzers that we delivered to Ukraine last year." The situation is a direct consequence of a number of factors, among which is the role that Germany accepts to play in the American unipolar order. In recent decades, Berlin has acted as a veritable country colony, accepting abusive impositions that often disregard a state's national sovereignty. The militarization of Europe. Germany was prevented from maintaining a stable defense mechanism because Washington was concerned, as it would strengthen the militarization of Europe, placing Berlin and the entire European continent outside of NATO's sphere of influence. However, at the same time, the U.S. is interested in exploiting as much as possible the capacity of the German military-industrial sector, forcing the country to participate in the proxy wars it is waging around the world, such as in Ukraine at the moment. In other words, NATO favors unfavorable conditions for Germany and prevents the country from having a necessary means to fulfill its own obligations. In the current situation, Berlin will have to choose between continuing to send weapons to Kiev or improving its own forces. Obviously, it will be possible for Germany to keep up with NATO's demands while systematically sending weapons to Kiev. One way to Germany? Everything shows that there is only one way for Germany to establish an independent and sovereign defense policy that meets the strategic needs of the country and not the interests of NATO. Berlin undoubtedly needs to improve its military capability, but it must not do so in order to meet the obligations imposed by NATO or the continued supporting of foreign neo-Nazi regime. Ignoring the Atlantic Alliance, it will be possible for Germany to build a strong and effective defense mechanism without necessarily maintaining combat readiness, since outside NATO there is no immediate danger of war. What a counterattack! Now, closely following the developments on the Ukrainian front, there were reports pointing out that the long-awaited counterattack by Zelensky regime may never happen. It's recalled that in a recent interview with the Associated Press, Zelensky claimed that he will be under pressure both from the international community and from inside Ukraine when the last Ukrainian leaves Bakhmut. This pressure pushes the Ukrainian president to revise many decisions. Bakhmut is a meat grinder. Now, the big question that arises is why did the U.S. did not deliver drones similar to Iran's Shahed drones to Kiev for the spring counteroffensive? It seems that the West provides as many weapons as it needs for their purposes without concern for the operations needs of Ukraine. As analysts point out, the West needs a freeze of the special enterprise. If Ukrainian forces succeed in recapturing the land corridor to Crimea by recapturing Metylopotis and Berdyansk, this would mean a potential escalation. If Ukraine's armed forces fail, then the Russian military will surely advance further, and it is not clear where the next line will be for negotiations with Russia. In this case, and in the view of the 2024 presidential elections in the United States, Donald Trump will certainly have more arguments against Biden. The issue of Ukraine's counterattack has been removed from discussions with the West, and Zelensky is preparing Ukrainian society for a freeze on the conflict, quote, as if it's not his fault, it just happened, he was forced to act, end quote. And this is from Banking News. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.